Here's a question from Will Black. How would you respond to the claim, sexuality isn't something we need to understand, sexuality is something we need to accept?
I'm not exactly sure what that means.
I would imagine that somebody, maybe he's made an argument to somebody about, say, why certain things are wrong when it comes to sexuality, and maybe they're saying, we don't need to understand what it's about or anything, we just need to accept what people say about themselves when it comes to this.
But that's like saying, look, we don't need to understand why some people are violent, psychopaths or whatever. We just need to accept it. Well, why would we just accept something that's bad? They might say. That's different. Why is it different? Well, that is bad. Okay, well, the whole issue here is whether the behaviors in question, whatever those happen to be where this response is given, the person who's given the response presumes that they're benign kind of behaviors. They are benign to culture, and they are benign to the individual who practices them. This is another part that almost nobody ever talks about. Well, I'm not hurting others. Well, whether or not that's true, you may be hurting yourself. And that's another factor in here. Okay? But maybe these behaviors are not benign. That's really the issue. If a thing is morally benign, then Christians are making a mistake by barking up that tree. This is where, well, I won't even get into all these. There are things that some Christians think are fine and other things Christians think they aren't. Well, people should follow their own conscience, but whether a thing is moral or not has to be determined by some reasoning from Scripture. Okay? And if it's not morally questionable, then all right, we don't need to analyze it closely. We just accept it, allow it, whatever, live and let live. But if it's morally questionable, well, then that's an entirely different thing. Or if it's dangerous, not just to others, that would make it morally questionable, but dangerous to the individual, that also makes it morally questionable in my view. So that a lot depends on what is in view here. And when you hear a saying like that, this is where it has to be unpacked with some questions. And what do you mean by that question, some variation, is going to be a critical question to unpack this. Why wouldn't we need, if somebody's sick, we don't need to know? If there's a sickness, I'm just saying, if there's a health issue, a physical sickness, we just don't need to know what caused it. We just need to accept it. No, of course we need to know we have to do a diagnosis so we can do an antidote because the circumstance isn't good. Well, that could certainly be the case with a whole host of things that are moral, or at least arguably moral. And so this slogan is not adequate to dismiss things whose moral legitimacy is in question. What it is an attempt to dismiss the moral question. That's what's going on here. And you can see it from a mile away. It's presuming everything's okay, so leave the person alone. You don't have to ask what caused whatever, this proclivity in their life, because it's not a proclivity, a tendency to evil in some sense. It's not a proclivity. It's just a thing. So what does it matter? Some gentlemen prefer brunettes, some prefer blondes. What are you making a fuss about? Who cares about why one or the other? Notice that you can say that without controversy because preferring a blonde over brunette has no moral ramifications unless the blonde you prefer over the brunette is a woman that's not your wife, and your wife is the brunette. But you see, we're bringing in different elements there that have moral consequences. People who say these kinds of things, I guarantee you, are simply trying to dismiss the moral claims that are made regarding this thing. If this behavior is immoral and unnatural, then finding out what might be at the root of an aberration that ends up producing immoral behavior might be helpful. But if a person is willing to dismiss the moral question Well, and of course, the question about source and change and, that all is irrelevant to them. But it makes a presumption, though, and that's what's going on here, I think.
And even if this isn't in terms of source, if it's just in terms of understanding what it is we are supposed to do and not supposed to do, I think what's at the base of this question is the idea that we don't have to conform ourselves to an objective morality when it comes to sexuality. We don't need to understand what is the arguments for each one. We don't need to understand any of that because we just create whatever we want. So
That's right.
Is sexuality something that we create for ourselves, or is it something that we're trying to conform ourselves to? Mm-hmm. And that's really, I think, what it comes down to for this. And so what I like to do in questions like that, especially when this is very unclear, after you get all the information about what they're claiming, try to bring it back to the base worldview question. Because even when you get back to the question of whether or not there's something we're conforming ourselves to, there's a question of, well, why would there be something we're conforming ourselves to? It's because there is a God who created us. Mm-hmm. And if we can get back to earlier questions, not only are they less controversial, I mean, it's less controversial to talk to someone about whether or not God exists, but the later questions will make more sense. Because to a lot of people, it doesn't make any sense why we would say that there is morality attached to certain sexual acts.
Right. Because it implies that we are beholden to someone greater than us. We have obligations about that. I remember Craig Hazen talking about being invited to a party that was almost exclusively homosexuals. And he being the only Christian there, was addressing the challenges that came up. And he said, let me ask you a question. This was a great way of setting the stage. And he said, if there is a God, do you think he would have any legitimate say in how we use the bodies that he gave us for sexuality, for sex? And since it's a conditional, if there was, the people, according to his response, what Craig said was they responded, yeah, if there was a God, I guess he would have something to say. Now, I'm not sure if people nowadays would say this. This happened a number of years ago, and people's sentiments change about these things. But then it shows that the real issue here is one you were just touching on a moment ago, Amy, is there a God who has made the world a certain way? Is there? Now, part of the problem nowadays, if people say there is a God, and if he doesn't let me do, even if there is a God, and he doesn't let me do whatever I want sexually, then he's not a good God. Because in order for a God to be good, he must agree with me on everything moral. That's really what that amounts to, which when I put it that way, you can see how infantile that response is, but it is the way a lot of people think nowadays.